California friends. Michael Shirts. I've known Michael for over 40 plus years. I love his Facebook post. Michael is extremely creative. We first met in Los Angeles in the early 70s. I love the art that he does. He definitely thinks outside of the box. Yes, Michael loves to meditate. Fuzby Mars. Fuzby was born with a guitar in his hand. He is a musical genius. On top of that, he loves to meditate. What a great combination. I haven't been in contact with him in many years, yet I read his Facebook post. Fuzby is still having the time of his life. John Somerville. What can I say about John? John was smiling when I first met him in the 70s. John was smiling in the 80s. Fast forward 20 years, and John is smiling today. Yes, John loves to meditate. Susie Whitten. I haven't spoken to Susie in many years. Many of my close friends are good friends of hers. I remember she had a great singing voice. Always loved her sense of humor. Susan Stifelman. My brother John and Hanley was good friends with Susan. Last time I saw her was only a few years ago in Kansas City. I met her mom. She was a divine character. I'm sorry to hear that your house burned down in the Malibu fires. David Wilbur. My brother John and I really liked David. We first met him in the early 70s. I remember he had a great sense of humor. Yes, he loved to meditate. Another great trait. I haven't seen nor heard any news in many years. Randy Lamont. Here's another adventure in the web of life that ties us together. I first met Randy in Portland, Oregon in 1973. You can tell by this picture he loves to laugh. 20 years later, I'm living in Maui. I'm in a seminar, and guess who walks into their room? Good old Randy. David Nelson. I first met David in Seattle in 1973. I was living in Portland. Randy Davis was going to speak at a college campus in Seattle. This is where I met David. David is an exceptional artist. Here's a Facebook post from David. Along with 300 other guests in the greater Los Angeles area, I submitted work to be considered for this year's LA Open Expedition, juried by James Panozzo. I was happy to receive this email. Congratulations, you've been accepted into the 2019 LA Open Exhibition. The juried expedition will serve as a gateway for a diverse range of artists in the greater Los Angeles area to display their artworks on Museum Row, home to the 4 major Los Angeles museums. The reception is this Saturday, January 5th from 5 to 8 p.m. You're invited. Paula Wenger. My brother and I first met Paula in LA during the 70s. 20 years later, we're in a store in Nevada City, and Paula walks into the store. She says, "I reckon, John." That was amazing. Michael Peregrine. My brother John and I have known Michael since the 70s. He has a great sense of humor. Yes, he loves to meditate. Michael has been on the forefront of bringing new technologies of creating water for many years. Great guy. Alan Thomas. My brother John and I have known Alan since the early 70s. Alan is an incredible singer and musician. He has been playing. He has been playing since he was born, friend. He lives in Kauai. Alan loves to meditate, windsurf, and surf. My kind of guy. Aloha to you, Alan. It's been many moons since we've seen each other. The journey with the girls. I look back now on this incredible journey I was going to embark on. Let me introduce you to Kali Rodriguez, Kathleen Cook, aka Cookie, and Tess Davis. These were my traveling partners on this journey. We were going to hitchhike from Kenya to South Africa. I asked Miraji if we were going to make it there alive. He said yes, you're going to have a hell of a lot of adventures along the way. To this day, I wonder why we never just didn't take a plane to South Africa. But that wouldn't be a journey, would it? I was just 19 years old, a mere kid, yet I learned so much on this journey.
We took a train from Delhi to Bombay. Miraji was in Bombay for a week. Upon reaching the train station, I realized that I lost the directions to the ashram. I just laughed and knew that everything would be all right. I was traveling with 3 Western girls. I said, let's go hop in a taxi. We got in a taxi and the driver said, where do you want to go? I said, we will direct you. Bombay is a huge city. None of us had ever been there, and he couldn't believe it. But he did as he was told. I closed my eyes and received directions on where to go, left, right, etc. After about 45 minutes of driving, I told the driver to stop. We got out of the car, knocked on the door, and walked right into the ashram. I never told Miraji how we got there. It was just a matter of fact. Before we left to Kenya, Miraji asked us if we wanted any holy water. Holy water is a custom in India where the master places his foot in water. I only had a canteen, and Miraji placed his foot inside of the canteen. We all laughed. The next day we headed out to Kenya. On board the plane was Kali, Kathleen, and Tess. These were the 3 girls I traveled with from New Delhi. On board the plane, we drank the water from the canteen. All of us got rip-roaring drunk. I've been drunk prior to that once or twice, but this is a drunk of joy. We all somehow managed to saunter off the plane. We spent a few days in Nairobi. Tess's parents lived on the outskirts of town. Kenya was an incredible country. Parts of it looked like England. We relaxed for a few days. I remember one moment at Tess's house. I was meditating in the backyard. When I opened my eyes and saw Miraji standing there, he was laughing and laughing. I remember in Bombay asking him if we were to make it to South Africa. We were going to hitchhike from Kenya to South Africa. He said we would, but we were going to have a hell of a lot of adventures along the way. While we were in Bombay one day, I was in Miraji's room where all of a sudden he got out of his bed, stood up, and started to wave his hands towards one of his initiators, Ashoka. The hair on his whole body stood up. It looked like he put his hand in a light socket. He was yelling, "Please, Miraji, stop it." After about 20 seconds, Miraji's hand fell to his side and Ashoka was back to normal. Being an 18-year-old kid that I was, I said, "Hi, Miraji, do you want to zap him once more?" Miraji said, "Sure," and just for a fraction of a second, he raised his hand and put electricity back into him. Miraji was electrocuting him. We all laughed. This is my first time that I spent close time with Miraji. There was only a few Westerners there. It was so beautiful to play with him, at the same time, have a great respect for him. One night, we were sleeping in the tent when a huge thunderstorm came and blew away the tent. We awoke and found ourselves sleeping in a sea of mud. Quite the experience. I remember looking at the telephone poles and seeing Miraji laughing and laughing. We slowly started to hitchhike from Kenya to South Africa. I have memories of our first night getting a ride and being on the Kenya plains in a horrendous rainstorm. Here we were in Africa, and the only houses around were grass huts. It was quite an experience. I remember one border crossing between Kenya and Tanzania. The Tanzanian border official became very upset because we didn't have a visa to enter the country. Kali became very upset and told the guy off. I was receiving an intuition to be quiet and to respect this officer. They pulled us into a room, and this officer just started to yell to Kali. All of a sudden he stopped and said, "I'm about to throw both of you in jail, but because, pointing to me, you've been such a gentleman, I will let you go." Another lesson in intuition. In Tanzania, the Chinese were building a railroad. Thousands of Chinese truck drivers were passing by. They all had the same expression on their faces. I remember one ride where Kali and I got picked up by two intelligent black Africans. We got in the car. After a few hours of driving, they got out of the car and shot two cows with a rifle. We thought we were next. They got in the car and said, "Oh, we just shot two elephants." We agreed with them. We knew we shouldn't cause any conflict, or maybe we would be next. I remember one night we were in a small jungle of town in the middle of nowhere. I was eating this soup that was full of mosquitoes. The air was so thick with mosquitoes that mosquitoes were falling into my soup. It was quite the scene. It was super humid and hot. I was lucky not to get malaria. Well, we finally met up with Tess and Kathleen. We switched partners. I hitchhiked with Tess to the capital of Zambia. We all decided to meet there. It was quite an experience. We arrived at Lusaka, got out of the car, and moments later, Kali and Kathleen got out of the car. We were all standing there when this Zambian came up to us and offered us to stay at his house. We went to his house, a dairy in the country. His name was Gary. We told him what we were doing and where we were going. At this time, our money situation was zero. A few days before, we ran out of money. I was pleased because I would see that everything would be taken care of. Anyway, Gary's uncle was president of the national TV in Zambia. He could arrange a television interview for us. The next day, around 5 o'clock, after the news, we were on national television. I only wore my Indian whites and no shoes. We had a beautiful interview for about 1 hour. The interviewer was very sincere. There was no sarcasm in his voice. The people of Africa were simple and open people. The TV station received hundreds of phone calls asking, "What was that?" The response was so great that the next day we were asked back to the TV station. The same phenomena happened. The Indian community heard us and invited us to their community. Every day we would give discourses in their temples and homes. We were treated like kings and queens. They would give us money, watches, and clothes. We had probably at least 6 major meals a day. It is a custom to accept food at someone's home. Each one of our guests would provide a huge spread. I remember one Hindu temple where the priest would take down Krishna's picture and put up Raji's picture. This is like the Catholic Church taking down Christ's picture. I remember seeing the Victoria Falls like it was yesterday. There was hundreds of monkeys in a forest canopy overlooking this incredible waterfall. Kali and I stood on this bridge, and a 360-degree rainbow encircled us. To this day, I can visualize this waterfall.
South African friends. The following are people I remember in South Africa. Milky. I first met Milky in India in 1971. He was quite the divine character. He was brewing laughter and humor. Milky was about 10 years older than me. I was just a kid, 18 years old. We spent time together in Africa. A few years later, Milky comes to Portland, Oregon for a month. Great guy. He enjoys the adventures in life. He has a great story to tell. Gary Gerard. When I was in India, Gary told the story how he was searching to find himself. He bumped into a sadhu who didn't speak a word. His name was Moni Baba. Moni Baba told him to go see his teacher. To make a long story short, he did. Gary was one of the first Westerners to be introduced to Maharaji. For Maharaji's birthday, the entire ashram took a train from Hardwar to Patna. It took about 3 days. In Patna, we bumped into Moni Baba. It was quite the encounter. Bruce Sirota. Here's another story of the web tying us together. I meet Bruce in India, then in South Africa, and finally in New York. Bruce loves to sing. He has a heart of gold. Sandy Collier. I didn't know Sandy very well, yet I sure bumped into her. I first met her in India in 1971, then in South Africa, England, Denver, and Florida. Sandy is an incredible cook. She was exceptional in Indian cuisine, which was virtually unknown in the West. At that time, she was cooking for Maharaji. I love to read her Facebook posts. Larry Rosenfeld. Larry is Nadine's brother. Presently, he and his sister is living in Israel. I didn't know Larry as well as his sister, yet being on Facebook, we have communicated numerous times. Great heart he has. He is also an artist. Nadine Sirota. Nadine was a very kind soul. I met her first in Johannesburg. 3 years later, she was living in New York. Bruce and Nadine invited me over for dinner. We catch up on old times. We are both on Facebook, so we can see what's going on in our lives. Robin Heslop. I first met Robin in India, South Florida, and South Africa. Robin's passion is art and growing incredible gardens. He also loves horses. I've known him for over 40 years. He originally is from England, but has been living in South Florida for over 30 years. Hi, Robin. It's been many moons since we have seen each other.
Chris Parker. I first met Chris in Cape Town, South Africa, over 45 years ago. We became instant friends. I introduced Chris to meditation. Now, if you like to meditate and you're a surfer, you're on the same wavelength. Chris and Nigel are like brothers to me, yet I haven't seen them since my time in Cape Town. In fact, it wasn't until recently did we hook up again. We discovered each other through Facebook. All three of us would have Skype sessions. Nigel in South Africa, Chris in Australia, and myself in good old Kansas. We would talk at times for 3 hours. Now that's a good use of technology. It seems just like yesterday. Now, I've known them for probably less than 6 months, yet the connection between all of us is like brothers. I find that fascinating. Kali Rodriguez. I first met Kali in India in 1971. We hitchhiked with Kathleen Cook and Tess Davies from Kenya to South Africa. To this day, I wonder, why didn't we fly? But it was an incredible adventure. Read the chapter Travels in Africa. I first learned how to cook Indian food from Kali. She at various times became Raji's cook. Indian food at that time was very exotic and different. Kali taught me the ropes. She taught me the main concepts. I remember Kali teaching me how to cook dal. Dal is one of my favorite comfort foods. There is a step where you get a cast iron pan, heat up some ghee, clarified butter, and place cumin seeds in the pan. The cumin seeds will begin to pop, and the room will be filled with this incredible smell of the roasted cumin seeds. You then add chopped onions, garlic, tomatoes, ginger, and dried chili peppers. This step is called making the chonk. You saute this until the mixture turns golden brown. When it does, this mixture is poured into the dal and makes this incredibly sizzling sound. You have to be careful to use the lid to cover the dal so you won't get burned. Anyway, I have probably made this hundreds of times and I never duplicated that sound. Now I'm a good Indian cook, but Kali has taken it to a higher level. I still remember that sizzling sound in my mind. Kali has a love and adventure for life. She was a great travel partner. She was easygoing and had a great attitude. It was an amazing journey. Kali's grandfather was president of Mexico at some time. Her mom danced with Esther Williams. I stayed at Kali's mom's house in the 70s, and she was a great host. I could see in Kali a lot of her mom. This house was at the tip of Baja. At that time, this part of Baja was relatively unknown, not today. Kali had a great singing voice. She played the guitar and sang these incredible songs. I feel meditation brings the soul to the surface. When she sang, I could feel the sweetness coming from within her. When I think about Kali, I can hear her singing. She had this haunting effect, much like the Irish singers, such as Enya. Music, if done properly, is a manifestation coming from God. I have nothing but great memories of Kali. She will always be dear to my heart. Kathleen Cook, aka Cookie. I first met Kathleen, aka Cookie, in Premnagar Ashram in 1971. I was only 18 years old. Kathleen told me a beautiful story that occurred only a few months previously. Somehow, she bumped into Maraji, a Bihari Singh, in the streets of San Francisco. Maraji was given a talk there. Somehow the details are fuzzy. They asked Cookie if she could drive them to Los Angeles. So she borrows a beat-up Volkswagen and had the adventures of her life. Raji was only 13 years old at that time. Cookie was one of my traveling partners on the journeys in Africa. She remembers the time when taking a train from New Delhi to Bombay, now called Mumbai. The trains were super dirty. I think I had to sleep on the dirty floor. We reached our destination, and we all realized that no one had the directions. I was quite young and naive. Maybe or maybe not. I had no fear. We get in this taxi, and the driver says, "Well, where do you want to go?" And I said, "I'll direct you there." So we drive for about 45 minutes. I'm getting signals to turn left and turn right. At some point, I tell the driver to stop. We get out of the car, knock on the door, And guess who's inside? Miraji and Bihari sing. At that time, we really didn't think anything about it. We had faith. At the same time, meditation helps to bring up the subconscious where events like this can happen. Well, we were in Bombay one day. I was in Miraji's room when all of a sudden he got off his bed, stood up, and started to wave his hands toward one of his initiators, Ashoka Nun. The hair on his whole body stood up. It looked like he put his hand in a light socket. He was yelling, "Please, Miraji, stop it." After about 10 seconds, Miraji's hand fell to the side and Ashoka Nun was back to normal. Being that 18-year-old kid that I was, I said, "Hey Miraji, you want to zap him once more?" Miraji said sure, and for just a fraction of a second, he raised his hands and put electricity back into him. Miraji was electrocuting him. We all laughed. This is my first time that I spent close time with Miraji. Cookie and Kali were present in the room. It's so beautiful to play with Miraji, at the same time, have a great respect for him. Before we left to Kenya, Miraji asked us if we wanted any holy water. Holy water is a custom in India where the master places his foot in water. I had only a canteen, and Miraji placed his foot inside of the canteen. We all laughed. The next day we headed out for Kenya. On board the plane was Kali, Kathleen, and Tess. These were the 3 girls I traveled with from New Delhi. On board the plane, we drank the water from the canteen. All of us got rip-roaring drunk. I'd been drunk prior to that once or twice, but this was a drunk of joy. We all somehow managed to saunter off the plane. We spent a few days in Nairobi. Tess's parents lived on the outskirts of town. Kenya was an incredible country, part of it like England. It was so much fun traveling with Cookie. We had hardships along the journey, but it didn't bother us. I can't imagine hitchhiking through Africa today. We made it to South Africa. We spent a few weeks in Johannesburg, and then Cookie was sent to Durban, and I was sent to Cape Town to prepare for Miraji's visit. As Miraji was leaving Africa, he told Cookie, Kali, and I to help in his coming to San Francisco. I flew with Miraji back to England. I remember the day after I got back, Miraji was speaking to a large group of people. I walked into their room and he stopped speaking and turned to me. He said, "Right now, my body is in England, but my soul is in South Africa." It was a remarkable statement. The South African people captured his heart. I stayed a few weeks at home, and then I took the Amtrak train from LA to San Francisco with Kali. We go by the Hollister Ranch, and floods of memories come up. We arrived in San Francisco and catch up with Cookie. Miraji came and did a program at the University of Berkeley. I saw Cookie on and off throughout the years. She always inspired me. She loves to meditate. She also became an exceptional chef. She cooked for many people in Hollywood. I didn't know that until years later. My daughter, Aliyah, lives in Ashland, Oregon. And we visit her about twice a year. Well, guess who moved to Ashland? Yep, Kathleen Cook. We have seen each other a few times in the past few years. I've taken her to an Indian restaurant a few times, and she came to my birthday party at a Mexican restaurant on Christmas Eve. My mom had Mexican food the night I was born, and it's a family tradition. It's always a delight of being with Cookie. She lights up the room. I love her laugh. I can hear her soul coming out. Cookie keeps up in the current events in the world, so conversation can be quite lively. We talk about old times and how fortunate we are. I'm so glad that she is a web in my life. Cookie, from the bottom of my heart, thanks for all you do.
Mexican friends. I really don't have much information on many of my Mexican friends. I can't find them on Facebook. My heart goes out to you. Thanks for this journey in life. I will never forget you. Unnamed. This person prefers to be unnamed. She was an inspiration to me. I would love to go to the open air market in downtown Mexico City. It was huge. She knew the market extremely well. I was introduced to many different kinds of herbs. My favorite licuado smoothie was made of mamey and milk. I can't find fresh mamey in the States. It's all frozen. Thank you for showing me the beauty of the open air markets. Anna Carney. Anna was my first girlfriend. Look under the first girlfriend story in this book. Jaime Mancos. Jaime is like a brother to me. I first met him in 1972 in Los Angeles. We then met again in Mexico, years later in Miami Beach, and then again in Los Angeles. We have the same spiritual mindset. He loves to meditate. John Philippe Lemay. John Philippe is another person who I've seen the web of life tying us together. We first met in Mexico, and then Florida, and years later in Sedona. My wife Barbara and I spent some time with John Philippe and his girlfriend. They made incredible jackets. Alan Rettinger. I first met Alan in Mexico City in the early 70s. Alan is an incredible chef. Now, I love to cook. Alan brings it up 10 slots. I call Alan once or twice a year to catch up on things. Kali. Search for Kali in this book. She and I had many great adventures together. Candy. Candy and Kali were good friends. Candy was an exceptional baker. Boy, did she know how to bake homemade bread. I still remember her favorite candy was marzipan. It is a sweet made from almonds. Sue and Pat Smith. I first met Sue and her husband Pat in Mexico City. They were playing in a Philharmonic orchestra in another city. I think it was Tampico. Both of them were incredible people. I loved the depth of the talent that they had. They knew how to enjoy life. Years later, when I was living in South Florida, they would invite me over for dinner. Mary Higgins was a great friend of theirs. Pat died a few years ago. I miss him. Diane Clark. I first met Diane in Mexico. We were good friends. She loved life. My brother John and his family shared a house with Diane and her boyfriend Pepe in Costa Mesa, California. I stayed a short time there. I haven't heard any news from her in over 40 years. I saw Pepe in Mexico City around 1985. Nacho Sanchez. Nacho was another good friend of mine. I remember that I once called him on the phone, and it was like a party line. The person who answered the phone had to travel to Nacho's house, and he had to come to this place to talk to me on the phone. John Roberts and I spent a few days at their ranch. We were welcomed by their family. Federico Rodriguez. Federico was good friends with Nacho. He was a graphic artist. This was way before computers were involved. I remember him taking me to his office to see how they did it in his day. I will always remember his great laugh. I can still see it in my mind. Memo. Memo was another great friend. He was owner of a bank in Mexico City. During the 80s, the Mexican governments took over many banks. Memo had around 3 branches which the Mexican government took. Memo learned how to meditate and helped sponsor us in many ways. Ramis. Ramis was Memo's friend. I remember a grand adventure we had on a driving trip to Acapulco. It was in his Mustang. Boy, did he know how to drive fast. Bob Cleontis. Bob died a few years back. I remember the time he took me to a prison to visit a friend of his. Bob had a great heart. I will miss him. Newness. Here's another web that ties us together. Geet and I go to Colombia to talk about meditation. Geeta's best friend is Newness. A few years later, I come to Mexico City and Newness is living there. What a small world. Newness and Bob become good friends.
Santa Fe, New Mexico. I went to J. Victor Shear Academy of Natural Healing in Santa Fe, New Mexico for 1 year. It was an incredible experience. I made enough money in Canada to pay for my tuition. Dr. Shear was a well-loved, respected naturopath physician massage therapist in Santa Fe for over 40 years. He was a great healer and teacher. Short and wiry, Jay was a strong man with huge warm hands. He had a wonderful sense of humor, a generous spirit, and a kind heart. His compassion for those in pain or need was boundless, and he never turned anyone away. Jay trained hundreds of students. Jay introduced me to Saint Germain, an ascended master. Back then, he was on the cutting edge of New Age, Old Age thought. This is from his school's website. His love and passion for massage therapy was central to all his work. Even at age 84, he would come out of his massage treatment room doing a little dance, saying, "If you're doing it right, it gives you energy." As a naturopath, Dr. Shear also practiced homeopathy, nutrition, herbal medicine, color therapy, colonic irrigation, and spiritual healing. He was a pioneer in the naturopathic field, passionately committed not only to the healing process of individuals with whom he worked, but also to the living body of knowledge that's always evolving and can be passed down from teacher to student in a mentoring tradition. Scott Gershwin was the primary teacher. He was a gentle soul. The classes usually occurred inside of his house. Scott and his wife Vivian died in an airplane crash in Burma. This is from the New York Times. On June 21st, 45 Burmese died when a Burmese airplane, Fokker Friendship 27, a Dutch-made medium-range plane, that is, the airline's mainstream aircraft, hit an 8,200-foot high mountain minutes after takeoff from the eastern town of Heiho, about 280 miles north of Rangoon. The government has not said what caused the plane crash. The crash today occurred one day after diplomatic officials reported that police protection of the United States Embassy in Rangoon had been increased because of reports that an anti-American terrorist group had entered Burma. Here's a list of casualties. The State Department released the names of 12 of the Americans killed in the crash. Scott Gershwin, Santa Fe, New Mexico. Vivian Gershwin, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I took a trip with Scott Gershwin and Vivian to Mazatlan, Mexico during our spring break. We camped out for a whole week. This is when their relationship began. I had two incredible roommates and classmates, Silas Smith and Ethan French. They were both from Santa Fe, California. Silas was tall, around 6'6", but he had incredible agility. He was an incredible skateboarder. In fact, he won first place at a skateboarding event at Los Alamos, where the Manhattan Project occurred in the 40s. I have fond memories of listening to the Jefferson Starship play played the song Miracles on the radio. My other favorite song was Dust in the Wind by the band Kansas. We would skateboard at night on this incredible mountain road. Even would drive this car when the headlights were on full beam. Silas and I would ride down the mountain, weaving back and forth. It was a blast. Silas and I loved to play tennis at the governor's mansion. He was kind to let people play on his tennis court. Ephraim was fun to play with. We didn't play to win, but we played to have fun. Big difference. Both of them worked at the Sheraton Hotel as waiters. Another friend of mine, Bill Wyland, worked there also. Silas, Ephraim, and I for a while stayed at Nora Fisher's house. She lived a few blocks from the plaza. Nora was kind and gracious having us there. Nora was creator of textiles at the museum and the International Folk Art in Santa Fe. She has since retired. It was always an atmosphere and fun and enjoyment. I remember there was a party at Nora's friend's house. It was out in the country. This house was built out of adobe. It was awesome. One of my favorite styles is adobe. The adobe keeps the house cool during summer and warm during winter. I remember falling asleep on the floor. The next morning, my friend said, "Did you know we had a party last night and we danced all over you and you didn't wake up?" Talk about sound sleep. This is what Nora has written about her career. Pretty incredible. I will be honest, at that time, I really didn't understand her work. 40 years later, I'm beginning to see her importance in her field. Between 1965 and 1998, I had 33 years working as a curator with textile collections in a museum setting. First at the Textile Museum in Washington, D.C., and then at the Museum, the International Folk Art, Santa Fe, New Mexico. During that time, I worked with museum collections. I had several stints at designing and instituting new textile storage areas and was awarded an international partnerships among museums grant to do a museum exchange with the Kekar Museum in Pune, Madhusristar, Mud, Mirror, and Thread Folk Traditions of Rural India, published by Mapen Press in 1993, 1995, and most recently in 2006. I have pursued fieldwork studying the Banjari in 8 states: Himachal Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Gujarati, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, and Karnataka. As for myself, Nora Fisher, I have 33 years experience working with textile collectors in a museum setting. First at the Textile Museum in Washington, D.C., and then at the Museum of International Folk Art in Santa Fe, New Mexico. During the time I worked with museum collections, I had several stints at designing and instituting new textile storage areas. During my museum work, I took 2 personal senior fellowships, 1988 to 99 and 1999 to 93, that were processed through the American Institute of Indian Studies, New Delhi. Both grants were hosted at Gujarat Vidyapith and Ahmedabad, and both focused on the embroidery and dress of the Banjar. I have done fieldwork studying the Banjar in 8 states: Himachal Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Gujarati, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, and Karnataka. I am most at ease in Karnataka, working the Banjar, visiting and staying in Tandas, and meeting with Banjar in cities. Mud, Mirror, and Thread, Folk Traditions of Rural India was published by Mapen Press in 1993-95, and most recently in 2009. Nora had this small, funky convenience store near her house. I would buy bananas and frozen orange juice to make smoothies. During the winter, we would like to soak up the rays outside the house. I remember feeling the rays in my body. Words truly can't describe it. For a time, I worked at the Compound, a famous restaurant on Canyon Road. Esquire magazine awarded the Restaurant of the Year for the Southwest. It was built out of adobe. I loved the inside of the restaurant. The walls were painted in pure white. The owner was Victor Saghir, originally from Lebanon. He was a great boss. I remember they would serve these incredible meals for the staff. I once waited upon the table of Art Garfunkel, the Simon and Garfunkel fame. I would ride my bike to work. During the winter, it was so peaceful riding my bike back home at night. At times it would be snow and it was so serene. Nobody else would be on their road. I would pass the main plaza in town, and all these incredible lights were surrounding the plaza. I never saw that it was a custom to place candles inside of paper bags. Wow. This is called a La Maria or Farolito, depending on who you talk to. New Mexico is called the land of enchantment. It's in the high desert. About 40 minutes away is the Santa Fe National Forest. The Santa Fe ski basin is there. I first learned how to ski there. The most incredible sunsets were to occur there. Being in the high desert, it seemed you could almost touch the sky. At times, it would give me chills on the beauty. This is literally God's painting. The signposts are everywhere. Each and every sunrise and sunset was different. Yogi Bhajan and his followers had this incredible vegetarian restaurant in town. Back then, they didn't have very many. They served a mixture of Indian and vegetarian cuisine. They also had the Golden Temple ice cream with either honey or carob. You could buy the ice cream at the local food co-op. This is probably the best tasting ice cream I ever had. I met Yogi Bhajan once. Ephraim's friend was getting married and Yogi Bhajan was going to do the ceremony. His friend was an attorney for the organization. My friend Ephraim was friends with Juan Hamilton. I met him a few times. This is from Bazaar magazine, including the picture. Georgia O'Keeffe's intimate relationship with Juan Hamilton, 58 years her senior, was an art world scandal. At that time, Georgia O'Keeffe was my favorite artist. She definitely lived outside the box. I admired that. She moved to New Mexico from New York so she could paint whatever came her way. San Francisco had an avant-garde movie theater. They would play films all around the world. I remember they would serve incredible food there. It wasn't your typical movie food such as popcorn and soda. They would serve beer and wine. It was quite the experience. It's funny, my friend Paul Cohen's black sheep of the family was Ram Dass. Ephraim, Silas, and I saw him give a talk in Albuquerque about an hour away from Santa Fe. I don't remember too much about his talk. He went over his life. At that time, Ram Dass was at the forefront in the meditation movement. He was underground. At that time, meditation was still on the fringe of society. You were considered an outcast back then. Today, you can learn about meditation almost anywhere. Times have changed. Since then, I haven't seen Ephraim or Nora. When I moved to Ashland, Oregon, I heard rumors that Silas lived in the area. Through synchronicity, I tracked him down. It was just like the old times. Our connection never died. Silas comes to my Christmas Eve birthday party when I come to town for a visit. Joe Lopez. I first met Joe in India. Joe at the time was the owner of a dojo in New York City. He started his school in the 60s. Joe and his students provided security for Marathi at the Festival of Montrose. I was always impressed by Joe's demeanor. Here he was an incredible martial artist, and he had a heart of gold. He was kind and considerate towards others. He embodied the spirit of martial artists throughout history. When I lived in New York, Joe told me the story about how he got involved in Tai Chi and Qigong. One day he met a Tai Chi master in the early 70s. The master says, "Hit me in the stomach as hard as you can." Joe says, "I won't do that, I could kill you." The master says, "No, you won't." So Joe hits the masters and nothing happens. The master says, "Now it's my turn." The master doesn't even touch Joe, but with his hands sends energy through them and sends Joe crashing into a wall. That's how Joe gets introduced to Tai Chi and Qigong. He has been practicing ever since. Joe moved to Santa Monica in the 80s. He has taught classes at a park for over 30 years. Joe has combined meditation and his martial art practice to refine himself for over 50 years. I like that. I just found out I was writing this on May 7th that today is Joe's birthday. I haven't seen or spoken to Joe in over 30 years. Happy birthday, Joe. Mark and Geraldine Lornhurst. I first met Mark at the festival of Montrose. He was only around 15 or 16 years old at the time. Mark came with his friend Joe Lopez. He helped with the security at the festival. Both my brother and I bonded with Mark. We have been friends ever since. Both my brother and I have both stayed for an extended time at Mark's family house during the 70s. His parents made us a part of their family. I still remember a dish that Mark made for dinner. It was broccoli and shredded Jarlsberg cheese. It was delicious. Mark was one of those people who helped me get involved in computers. At that time, he was going to school and he was studying computer science. Both Mark and I lived for a short time in the ashram in New York. Mark's parents were smart enough to say, "We will support you in your studies so you can get a degree." Wise choice. I saw Mark on and off during the 80s. In 1982, I went to New York City for a business trip and stayed at their house for a week. One morning, I made the kids, Rachel and Christopher, pancakes. 35 years later, whenever my name is mentioned, Rachel speaks about my pancakes. Mark is like a brother to my brother and I. We have known him for around 46 years. Mark is kind and extremely generous. I would say he has a heart of gold. I first met Geraldine in New York City in 1976. I knew a few of her friends. Mark's mom was a psychologist. One of her best friends was also a psychologist. Geraldine was mentored by her, and over time, she was an incredible counselor. She had the insight from her practice of meditation and a keen sense of intuition to her clients. She eventually had clients all throughout the States. Geraldine helped me when my marriage broke up. She taught there are two sides of the stories. Don't be a victim and learn a lesson from it. She also taught to take out the weeds in your own garden. Another wise advice. Mark and Geraldine have been together for over 40 years. They have been friends of mine for many years. I truly treasure them. They're one of my jewels in life. Words truly can't describe the love I have for the both of them. My first girlfriend. Before I met Anna Carney, I never had a true girlfriend. During my high school years, I had a hard time with the way we operate in society. For example, many of my friends would see a beautiful girl and say, "Wow, I wish I could get laid by her." They would compliment a girl by her breast size or judge someone who was overweight. I guess I saw life different as my friends. I knew this life was sacred. I knew that to know God wasn't to go to church on Sunday for an hour, then the rest of the week you can do anything you want. Knowing God isn't a token. You just don't unconsciously go through the motion. It's a moment by moment, day by day, year by year affair. At times, I was quite lonely in high school. All my friends had girlfriends, yet I never did. Girls liked me, but nothing ever developed. I think I only went on 2 dates in high school. I realized that loneliness was my soul was calling out to me. At times, it seems something external will fill the loneliness, but it never will. The cup must be filled from within. Being young, I didn't know that. I first met Anna in an ashram in Mexico City. She was from Ireland. Anna definitely caught my attention. She was on the same wavelength as me. She loved to meditate. She was fun and loved adventure and life. Anna had a great heart and soul. She was funny, she was smart, and she had wisdom. Also, she loved to cook. Anna was kind. She had the maturity and understanding that life is sacred. So over time, we fell in love. I remember once I needed to renew my visa for Mexico. Anna and I took a train to Guatemala. I still remember at the border crossing, this American boy around 10 years old with a beautiful parrot on his shoulder. My first thought was this boy already knows about life. I can sense that traveling was his education. We spent a week or 2 in Guatemala. I always will remember Lake Atilan. What a beautiful lake. The lake is surrounded by mountains and volcanoes. I love the Mayan people. They were short. Most of them were under 5 feet tall. Most of all, they were happy and content. They came from an incredible lineage. The Mayans at some point in time developed calendars that made the Gregorian calendar look primitive. Yet, we think they were ignorant and lived in the Stone Age. Anna and I visited Kali's mom. She had a house in Baja California. Along the way, we stopped off at Matachim Bay. This bay was well known since the 60s. On a good day, you could ride away for almost a mile. The only drawback is at sunset and sunrise, the Noceans came out by the millions. One day we took a walk up the point, past the bay. At some point, both of us realized that we should turn around. We couldn't quite pinpoint it. We turned around and started to walk back to Matachim Bay. Well, we were right to turn around. As soon as we were walking, a bullet whizzed so close we could hear it. We didn't turn around, but slowly walked away. At some point, Anna and I thought we were going to get married. It is a custom in Ireland that the man asks the father's daughter for his hand in marriage. So I did. Anna went back to Ireland to visit her family. We were going to meet in Toronto, Canada in a month. I remember Anna comes to Toronto and we're staying at this elderly couple's house. She made this dumpling soup that I still remember today. It was the best dumplings I ever had. We met Richard from White Rock, British Columbia. He was driving back home and said we could travel with him if we liked. We did. I remember traveling at night and an avalanche occurred as we were passing. We were at the right place and right time. If we were off by 30 seconds, we would have been covered in snow. We ran into Mahatma Rajaswar and Bill Patterson. They were going to do a TV interview and asked us if we wanted to come. We spent a few days there. Bill gave me a copy of a book about Milarepa. He was Tibet's greatest yogi. The Kagyu lineage still exists today, and in fact in Ashland, Oregon, there is a beautiful temple that comes from the Kagyu lineage. Bill unfortunately died about 10 years ago. He was well known for his kindness. We made it to British Columbia. We stayed at Dr. Michael Clapper's house. He has been on the cutting edge of health for over 40 years. Mahatma Rajaswar and Bill Patterson came to visit our house. We made this incredible Indian meal for Canada's Thanksgiving. Bill showed me how to put chapatis in the oven to puff up. It was a beautiful technique. Anna and I moved to White Rock. It's right on the border of US and Canada. It borders Semiahmoo Bay. I remember walking home with Anna late at night when it was snowing. It was so peaceful. I used to play chess with the elderly man next door. He loved my company. Anna and I went to Vancouver Island with a friend of mine named Richard. He wanted to try out surfing. We went to Wreck Beach. The waves were quite fun. The water was cold. A friend of ours had a nice sauna that we used to heat up. At some point, Anna decides to move to Nelson, British Columbia. Quite frankly, I felt lost for a while. I really didn't have the maturity and life experience to cope with this. You can't put your happiness and love into someone else without having that inside of you. Nobody can fill you up. I learned that you can't hold on to something forever. Everything changes. Our relationship was never the same. I spent about 6 months in Nelson, British Columbia. We stayed in a beautiful cabin built from a friend of ours. Bill Scholl, his wife and son lived there. Nelson was an incredible place. I loved the town and people. Many of the folks were involved in meditation in one way or another. The first time I ever saw fireflies was in Nelson. I was captivated by the flashing of the lights. We love going to Nelson's hot springs. It's a natural hot springs for many different temperature pools. It was a great place to go and relax with your friends. Back then, it was real cheap in getting in. One of my favorite moments was going to Kootenay Bay for a 3-day adventure with Anna. We took this ferry to this island. I remember having French bread and breech tea along with a little white wine. The ferry ride was gorgeous. Mountains were all around the lake and the water was crystal clear. During my stay in Nelson, I met someone who went to the J. Victor Scheer Academy of Natural Healing in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I decided to move there. Anna moved to Gainesville, Florida. We met up in California about a year later. Anna was still living in Florida. I was still living in New Mexico. I introduced Anna to my mom and dad. I remember my dad made homemade gazpacho soup. It was served cold. Anna and I made an Indian meal for my mom. During this trip, Anna and I went by car to Nevada City to visit my grandmother Josie. I love my grandmother. That was the last time I ever saw her. Anna and I never got together. The last time I saw her was over 30 years ago. We had lunch at a Chinese restaurant in Miami Beach. I remember having wonton soup. I have fond memories of Anna. Anna has been happily married since 1997. I'm happy that she has found someone special in her life. Thanks, Anna, for being a part of my life. Katharita Parsons Lamosa. When I was in India, the Indians in general had a whole different idea on the style of cooking. Their concept was to cook a meal for the Lord. Imagine all the care, love, and kindness you would put into the food. Cooking would become an art and devotion. This food would then be presented, blessed, and served to your family and friends. I like that idea. Fast forward to the present. We have cooking shows like Chopped, where they have 20 minutes to cook a dish. They hurry around the kitchen and slap together a dish to be judged by. The audience, including myself, is entertained by that. Yet, are they conscious? All their frustrations about time, the rushing around, competition between competitors, and the anger goes into the food. How about fast food restaurants like Burger King? This is a profit-driven company. Do they cook with a concept of cooking the meal for the Lord? You can answer that question yourself. Now, I live in New York City for a few years. This is where I met Katharita. Katharita embodies the spirit of devotion to her life, her family, and to her cooking. I was still learning how to cook Indian food, and she was my mentor. To this day, she's been an inspiration in my life. She taught me the fine details of Indian cooking. Many cooks hide their knowledge, but Katharina didn't hide anything. Some people are humble in their nature, and she definitely was. She was kind and sweet to everyone. She loved life and the adventures that came along the way. I love to see the care she put into her family life. I remember that one time Katharina and I did a 15-course Indian feast for a fundraiser. About 200 people came. We had a few volunteers and it took us around 3 days to cook. It was so much fun. Katharina took time off from her family. I love how she taught. It was so easygoing. I learn more when I'm relaxed. The wisdom just soaks within. To this day, I give tribute to Katharina. She helped bring my cooking level and awareness to a higher level. Thanks, Katharina, for being my friend. It's been over 30 years since we have seen each other, yet the bond of friendship can never be broken.